Hello, and welcome to the Concept Artist Podcast, interviewing up-and-coming concept artists to learn what it's like entering the industry today. Mounash is a concept artist currently working at Digital Extremes. They started work as a junior concept artist at Zviki Design Studio in Bangalore, India, before moving to Canada to study at Sin Studio. They did some freelance work with Virtuous Montreal, finally arriving at their current position. They've also been steadily working on fleshing out their own personal sci-fi IP, Anya, which uses a fusion of Art Nouveau and Art Deco styles to create a vibrant, spacefaring world. Welcome to the show, Mounash.
Thank you so much for having me, Christina, and thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Yeah, it was super exciting looking through all of your past work.
Thank you so much. Means a lot. It's been a long journey, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah, you've had quite the adventure.
I don't have that much of work experience, but it feels like it's been a long time since I started doing this, since I started back in animation school and like gradually finding my way into concept art. It feels like it's been a long time, but now that I actually think about it, it hasn't been that long,
As a first question, just for everyone that may not have a full grasp of the industry, what would you say is the thing that separates a concept artist from something like an illustrator or a matte painter?
It depends on a lot of things. It's a very good question. I think like a lot of beginners make this mistake of confusing concept art, illustration, or matte painting. Well, I personally think that they are actually very similar and not that different as people think they are, or they can entangle into each other. And the thing is, it depends on which studio you're working for or like which client you're working for. Sometimes, even if your position is a concept artist, you might be asked to do illustrations or matte paintings. And sometimes, even if you're doing illustrations, you might end up following the same pipeline as a concept artist would. But to illustrate your question more clearly, I would say that the job of a concept artist is to visualize ideas. It could be someone else's ideas, or it could be the concept artist's ideas. Once you visualize that idea, someone else is going to be using that idea for something else. Maybe they're creating a game, maybe they're using it to create a 3D model or something along those lines. Whereas illustration is more like the end product in itself. Maybe it's a book cover illustration or card illustration, whereas matte painting is I'd say matte painting is different from illustration and concept art, because matte painting is usually used in films or animation, live action or animation, where you're painting the backgrounds or using images to create a fake background when it's not actually feasible to shoot it real time, or when it's actually not possible to build it in 3D, or maybe it is possible, but then it's too expensive, and you just create a fake plate, a 2D plate, which gives an illusion of it being there in the film, right?
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think concept art and illustration is that different. In concept art, people think that, you need to make thumbnails and then you're creating a design. But it can be a very similar workflow even when you're when you're doing illustration. You might have to go through a very similar process where you're creating thumbnails and then getting approval for that and then taking it to the next stage. Well, in concept art, maybe you're designing a certain object, and that object has to be clarified from all different views or what its function is. But for an illustration, maybe you don't have to fully figure out every little detail in that illustration, but sometimes you might need to, so it depends.
Yeah.
What the client wants, basically.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, and even like the fundamental skills, I would say they could be very similar. Concept artist definitely leans more towards problem solving for something very specific, whereas illustration would be, maybe for aesthetic appeal or for narrative purposes. Maybe it has a less technical approach. I think they're very similar though, personally.
I think I understand what you're getting at, though.
Yeah, it could sound confusing, and I think it is confusing most of the times, but the fundamental skill sets, they remain very, very similar, I think. And I wouldn't advise people to consider them to be very different, maybe contrary to popular belief. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but yeah.
Yeah. Probably not marry themselves to one secure idea of what it specifically is.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. So when it comes to your particular art, though, where do you find the most valuable feedback for improvement?
I'd say people that I trust in terms of their artistic abilities. It's generally like my teachers that I've found in college, or some of my art friends that I really admire, or sometimes I just reach out to artists like, "Oh, I really admire his work. I've seen that guy on ArtStation or Instagram." Then I'll be like, "Hey man, can you have a look at my work?" And sometimes they're kind enough to like get back to me, and they'll give out some really good pointers. So I think it's always good to take feedback from people who you look up to, and sometimes just ask anyone, ask your parents or your siblings. And even then, sometimes they have like some interesting opinions that artists otherwise wouldn't have. And it's always fun to ask just random people for feedback. Otherwise, just looking at other artworks, you can like find a lot of solutions there. You're not necessarily asking them or those artists, but just by looking at their artworks and like seeing how they have solved certain problems can give you a lot of answers. Even just listening to podcasts or yeah, like what we are doing right now, or just tutorials and stuff like that. Sometimes you come across something and you're like, oh, okay, that's something interesting, and it stays and you remember that thing. And then when you like sometimes stumble on that problem, then like, oh, I remember that guy did that, or like that person did that, and like, I can do that now. And you end up doing that, and it works out somehow. Sometimes it doesn't, but it can be very random, like how you get feedback for improving your art. But yeah, like mostly I would say like ask feedback from people whose art you admire or look up to.
Was that a bit of the process that you had when you started focusing on building up your portfolio? Did you begin asking people that you admired for feedback, or did you just kind of dive right in?
Yeah, I was definitely asking for feedback from like so many people. Like my teachers at Sin Studio, they helped me out so much, and my colleagues there. I've made around, I think, 2-3 portfolios over the years, but like my current one mostly took feedback from my teachers and my colleagues, basically.
I know that this is a bit of a problem that a lot of artists have. What was, I guess, your process for making quote unquote good portfolio pieces? When did you decide, yes, this is something that I deem to be up to a quality to place in my portfolio? Was that, I assume, something that your teachers really helped you with as well?
Yeah, definitely. My process for making a good portfolio, that's a long answer, I think. Well, first of all, it comes down to research, like you really have to think about what story you want to say and why is it that you want to say that. So before, okay, let's get back to the time before I started creating this portfolio. I started creating this portfolio, like namely Anya, which is my IP I'm working on my personal IP I'm working on right now. I started it back in July 2020, last year. Before that, when I would create any portfolio piece, I would be like, oh, I saw this cool piece on ArtStation, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do something like that. And then I spend a couple of days or like a week, and then I see that, this is not getting anywhere. It's not good enough. And I think it comes down to not knowing what you actually want to say, or why is it you want to say that thing. This time, because I had like really good people guiding me at Sin Studio, like my amazing teachers, they beat it to my head that you just don't start just like that. Like you have to really think, and like for a long time, like what is it that you want to say and why is it that you want to say that. So that is what I did. Like we had like a course for just research, like finding something unique to say. And that's also another very important thing, that don't just create something cool just for the sake of it, right? It doesn't have to be, but it's better if it's unique, or if it's something new that you have to say, right? So yeah, it was just like tons and tons of research and experimenting. Like I would even like take other people's artworks. If I saw something interesting, I would like, oh, can I steal that? And then I would like just like stitch some different people's artworks together just to see like, what does this give me? Like, what can I take out from it? Like, it's not like I'm copying it exactly, but trying to stitch together different people's ideas and see what it brings to you, right? And that was like really eye-opening to me. And I was like, you can do that. That's very interesting. Like, you don't just copy one artist, but you take inspirations from different artists and put their stuff together, and then you come up with something new that doesn't resemble any of their work, basically. So yeah, it came down to like tons and tons of research, like weeks of research. So for our IPs, we didn't write our own story. Sin Studio had given us 3 different stories, all like that already existed. One was the Gladiator movie. And then the other one was The Black Cauldron. I think it's an old Disney movie.
Ah, yes, I know that one.
Yes, it's a pretty cool movie. It's kind of dark and gritty, but I really enjoyed it. And then the third one was The Descent of Inanna. It's not exactly a movie or anything. It's like an old Sumerian myth, basically. It's like a fairy tale kind of a thing. And that's the one I picked, basically. And so I basically had the story already, and my job was to like build the world for that story, right? We were given the freedom to pick any time period. It could be fantasy, sci-fi. We could pick our own cultural inspirations. We could like change the gender, age of the characters. So we were given a lot of freedom, and like once you already have a solid story to work from, it gives you like a really good starting point, to build an IP or an IP that can like morph into a portfolio, right? So I had a story, and I tried to create something unique that I haven't seen before. So when I moved to Canada from India, I was like super amused by the architecture in Montreal. There's like a lot of Gothic cathedrals and like old Victorian kind of architecture and stuff like that. It's like really, really inspired me. So I was like, okay, I'll try to fuse Gothic architecture with Indian stuff. I come from India, right? So I wanted to do something that has to do with my roots, basically. I grew up there, and the ancient Indian architecture, even the medieval stuff, they're like super amazing. And I wanted to have that in my portfolio. So I thought, I would fuse Gothic and Indian stuff. That would be fun. I tried it out, but I just, something wasn't working out that well. So I thought, okay, then let's try something else. And I tried Art Nouveau and Art Deco, basically. I tried combining that with Indian and Middle Eastern stuff. I had 2 factions in my IP. The first faction, I used Art Deco fused with Indian and Middle Eastern architecture and culture, basically. And then the second faction, I fused Art Nouveau with Indian and Middle Eastern. Indian and Middle Eastern, they're both very different, but I find they have like a very similar essence in the end, in certain things at least. So those 2 factions became like founding pillars of my design language, I guess. So first, the Art Deco stuff, they were all very sharp and geometrical and straight, or like just hard circles. And then the Art Nouveau part of side things, they were organic, mostly organic stuff. So yeah, that was basically the starting point. And I did some experimentations. Like I would just like stitch together some images that I found online. For example, I'd take the Taj Mahal, and then I would mix it up with some Art Deco architecture and to just like quick tests. And then, that looks interesting. Like you have the big domes. How do I describe that? Maybe the onion domes, kind of.
Yeah.
For Taj Mahal, right?
Yeah.
And then you would have like those Art Deco buildings from, I don't know, from the early 20th century, and then with those gold and black accents, and I would like add them up. And then I had this really unique looking Taj Mahal that looked like an Art Deco Taj Mahal. I was like, okay, that's very interesting. Let's do something like that. And then I started off, and like I started doing thumbnails and tons of iterations, and it turned into something else. Basically, over months, it became completely something else. That was the starting point, but it took me a long time to like finish a portfolio piece. Basically, I would work on it for months. Basically, it's not very healthy. I would say, like, don't drag on a piece for that long. I'm still doing it right now. Like, it's from Anya, and this one piece that I started way back in January, and I still haven't finished it now. I would advise that, I don't know if I should be, but I would say, like, if you're not happy with a piece, like, don't just like call it done, or don't just throw it away, like, keep working on it. Maybe take a break for like a month or two and then come back, but don't just like focus on quantity. Like, quality is very important. So that was my process for like trying to make a good portfolio piece. Like, I wasn't focusing on quantity. Like, I would take however long it would take to like make it really good, and I would compare it to the artwork that I admired, right? I wasn't like, oh, I did like maybe 0.5% better than my last piece, that's enough. And I was like, oh, that's not good enough to get a job. I mean, that's what most people told me. I guess it's kind of a toxic way of looking at things, but sometimes you don't have a choice, right?
Yeah.
So I would look at the really amazing artworks from maybe Ethan, Florent, Lebrun, and all those guys, and I would have their artwork right beside mine, and then I would compare like how far is my piece from theirs, and I'm like, oh, it's so far away. I'm like, okay, then I just have to keep working on it, and well, like, eventually, like, one day you should call it done, and then just call it done, and like maybe upload it to social media or whatever. Like, whatever. For me, it's like once I'm uploading it to social media, or I've shown it to my friends, and like I've declared that it's done, then it's done, basically.
Kind of know when to step away.
Yeah, basically. I don't think it's a good habit to like keep working on the same piece for too long, but at least should try to like really push it to the maximum, So that was kind of my process of building my portfolio, and I tried to have like variety in it. I didn't just wanna, like do environments or just props or characters. I wanted to do everything, kind of, which is again like you should take that that point with a grain of salt. I think like it's probably better to focus on one thing, or maybe two, maybe for creatures and characters, or props and environments, or environments and characters and props. But I try to do everything, basically. I don't think I've posted my characters anywhere. Like, I'm still working on them, but I'm not very confident about characters usually, so let's see what happens with those. And yeah, constantly taking feedback, being destroyed by my teachers. They would be like, oh, this is garbage. Like, this is not working. I mean, they weren't that mean. But I usually don't take it very personally when people are harsh on me. I'm like, yeah, like, it depends on like people, some people, if you like tell them their work is garbage, they'll probably like give up art, right? They will not do it anymore. Depends on their personality. But for me, I'm like, okay, man, I'll just prove you wrong,
I think that's a good way of looking at it. Just use it as fuel to...
Yeah, it just depends on people, some people like they really want that boost. They're like, you're doing great, but it could be better. And some people, they're like, this is not good, So whatever works for you,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And what did you have in your portfolio when you were hired for your current position?
For my current position, I had like 4 or 5 pieces on ArtStation, but like it wasn't like just 4 or 5 images. Like, I showed them the entire process of creating those 4 or 5 pieces. Like, there would be like design thumbnails, composition thumbnails, other studies references. So I was still showing a lot of things, but then again, like, I don't think to get hired you don't need a lot of pieces. Like, the most important thing that I was advised by my teachers was to like only put up your best work out there. So all of my works that I had on social media, especially on ArtStation, I deleted all of my old stuff. I was like, okay, this is not representing me anymore. So I just got rid of them basically and just had the best work. I had uploaded just the best work that I had. And I don't think you need that many pieces. Just 4 or 5 pieces are enough. But it's good if you can show them maybe 8 to 10 pieces with a good level of variety, especially if you're like a junior or starting out,
And how old were you when you entered the industry?
When I was working in India, I think I was 21 at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I was studying animation film design in India, and I was doing like a 5 years master's degree program. And after 3 years, I just dropped out. I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. It's just not for me, we were doing 3D animation, 2D animation, like animation filmmaking in general, and it's just too much for me. I can't handle, and especially animation. It's just so hard. And like, respect to all those animators out there. I just don't understand how they can do it. I tried, and I was like, okay, I'll just specialize in this concept art thingy, and then I applied to Cine Studio like right after dropping out of college for animation college. I applied to Cine Studio and they rejected me. And I was like, no, you've destroyed my dreams. What do I do now? So I started applying to jobs in India, and like it wasn't working out for me. Like no one replied. I had a really, really bad portfolio. Like few companies came to my college during that time to hire our seniors and like to hire third year students for internships. So one of their companies, they liked my work for some reason, and it was Wiki Design Studio, and I ended up working there as a junior game artist for a year, and that's where I actually started learning how to draw. Basically, I learned so much there. Like it's incredible when I think about it. Like without Wiki Design Studio, I wouldn't be where I am today. I was drawing, painting for like 8-10 hours every day. And like, working hours are usually pretty long in India, so I wouldn't be like getting out of the studio before 8 or 7:38 or sometimes even 9 or 10 p.m. Like that was like very common. But I had fun. Like I got the opportunity to work on very, very interesting projects. Like right after I joined, what was the studio? Treyarch. It was a game art outsourcing studio, basically, is Wiki Design Studio, and Treyarch reached out to us and they gave us some work for Call of Duty Black Ops 4, I think. Yeah, Call of Duty Black Ops 4. And it wasn't concept art, but we were doing card illustrations for the game, basically. So there's this thing called calling cards, and they needed like hundreds and hundreds of those cards, and they sent that work to us. And I think a few other companies in Asia, probably. And there weren't too many constraints for those card illustrations. We could just go like totally crazy, and it was so much fun working on that stuff, and like I learned a lot. There was the lead artist there at Wiki. His name is Lakshman, and he used to be my mentor at that point. He helped me out a lot, basically. And in that studio, we didn't have too many 3D programs, at least not for like for most of the 2D artists like me. And I think the IT guy was kind of lazy to install those softwares. I asked him so many times, please give me Blender. But he was like, I'll give it to you tomorrow. And then he never came, basically. And I had to draw everything. There was no 3D, right? And I think that ended up helping me a lot to learn the basic fundamentals. And we were also doing like a lot of slot games. It's not a lot of fun always, but I think it like really helped me improve like my fundamental stuff. And then I applied to Cine Studio once again after that, the next year, and luckily I got accepted.
Yeah, you really did have quite the adventure.
Yeah, and even after that, like my visa got rejected, for my study permit for Canada.
Oh no!
And yeah, my visa got rejected, and I was like, no, I guess I'm never going to Canada now. And I was super disappointed, but I had applied for the visa early, like a couple of months early, so there was like just a little bit of time to reapply again. And the second time, luckily, it got approved. But it happened to some people. Like if you get rejected for the second time, there's basically no hope, So
Oh, wow.
yeah, I dodged a bullet there, and yeah, my visa got accepted, and then I made it to Sin Studio, and yeah, everything worked out after that, basically.
How did you go about finding out about Sin Studio or that they were hiring? Was it via social media or a job listing or...
I found out about Sin Studio through a friend at my animation college in India. So one of our seniors from that animation college, he also went to Sin Studio to study there before, like a couple of years before me. And then he ended up getting a job at I think he's still working at IDOS, and he's a really good friend. His name is Mohit, and his work is super amazing. And one of my friends back in animation college, he told me, oh, there's this guy Mohit, he went to Canada to study concept art in Sin Studio. Maybe you should like see what he did. And I asked him, and he was like, yeah, I did this and that, and it worked out for me. And I was like, damn, like he improved so much in just 1.5 years, and then he was able to get a job. And if he can do it, maybe I can do it too, right? So I was like, okay, I'll do it. Then it's fine. It was still like a huge risk, It's super expensive, especially for like us Indians. Taking a loan was out of question, but I was lucky enough. Like my parents paid for everything, for the tuition and the stay there. But we only had so much money that I really, really needed to get a job right after graduating, or I wouldn't have money to survive. So I was like really, really pushing myself that, okay, I have to get a job anyhow. Like I wouldn't say like don't do art or like don't practice art just to get a job, but I was really in that place where I had to get a job, or I didn't have a choice basically, or I'd have to go back to India. I mean, it's not that I don't like how it's there, but I thought that there are really, really amazing artists here in Canada, especially around Montreal, and there's like so much to learn from them. So yeah.
And how many other places did you apply to any other places besides Sin Studio, or were you kind of dead set on them?
Well, Sin Studio was the only place I had. Sin Studio is basically an art school that's focused on concept art. And I didn't see any other good school in Canada or like anywhere else in the world that was affordable for me, like at least for my parents' budget. That was the only place that was there. So I applied there. And the good thing about Sin Studio is, like, especially for international students, is that it's a diploma course. So once you complete the diploma, you get like a postgraduate work permit, and that work permit basically lets you stay in the country after you graduate for, I think it's 3 years now. So I'm on that visa right now, basically.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's a really important point. you need the visa to stay here, right? I mean, at least for some countries, I guess.
What was the interview and application process like?
For my current job, or
for your current job and Sin Studio? I'd love to hear whatever you're down to talk about.
Oh, well, for Sin Studio, it was just I sent my portfolio, what my like 2-3 years old portfolio to them, and they asked me to write a letter of motivation. And after that got approved, we had an interview with the director of studies of Sin Studio, and he just asked me some basic questions like why do you want to do this? Why do you want to come here? And I think all they wanted to see was like our motivation. So I basically just showed him that, yeah, I really want to do this, man. Like, and for my current job at DE, the way it worked was I first got an art test, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The art test, I don't think I can discuss about it because I think it was under NDA.
Gotcha.
But yeah, like after I submitted the art test, I worked really, really hard. Like I didn't sleep for those days, like almost. Yeah, it was super hard. But I think I did a good, like, decent job, and I was somewhat surprised that, oh man, I didn't know I could do this and in this amount of time. I wasn't sure that if I would get it or not, but like the Warframe and to be able to work at Digital Extreme was really like a dream job kind of a thing for me. Like
Mm-hmm.
my entire IP Anya kind of has that art style of Warframe already, if you've noticed.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, like after I submitted the art test, and they were like, oh, we liked your stuff, and let's have an interview. So I think it took around, I don't know, a couple of weeks after the art test, or I think, oh no, it just took like a week, I think, or 6 days. And then we had an interview. There was our art director, our lead concept artist, and an HR representative. It was just a general kind of an interview, and I think it's the same. And they wanted to see if I'm not some, I don't know, some sort of weirdo, or just a normal human being that they can work with, basically. And
Yeah, totally.
yeah, like they wanted to see if they wouldn't have problems communicating with me, and just basic stuff like that. It wasn't hard. Like the interview was super nice. They were like really, really nice people. And yeah, like again, after I think the interview went pretty well, and I think they reached out to me after, again, maybe it took a week or two after that, after the interview, and they were like, we liked your work and the interview went well. Would you like to work with us? And I'm like, yeah, yes. So yeah, that's how it went, basically.
Well, that's wonderful. And for the folks at home, how long have you been working with them now?
Just finished 6 months yesterday.
And refresh my memory, is this a contract position or is this a full-time position?
It is a full-time position.
That is awesome. Did you have any expectations going into the job? And if you did they match reality? Or were you just kind of going in with absolutely no expectations?
Well, first of all, it's hard to answer that because we were still working from home.
Oh, true. Very true.
And yeah, and when I started working, I was in Montreal, but now I've moved to London, Ontario, and I've met some of my colleagues. They're all extremely nice people. They're like really, really fun to hang out with. And even when I was in Montreal, and even now I'm working remotely, but when I started, I was really scared. I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, I'll be all alone. But they were really nice because they had introduced this mentorship program.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was given a mentor. His name is Marco Hassman. He's a really, really amazing concept artist, and he was mentoring me for the first 3 months, I think. So we would have calls every week, and if I had any issues, I would just reach out to him. He taught me like how everything worked in the studio. Yeah, basically it was very nice. And I was given like interesting tasks even right from the start. Like it wasn't like I'm a newbie, so I wasn't just given like the like the boring tasks or anything like that. But it wasn't that. I was given to work on weapons, characters, environments, and like I got like a variety of tasks to work on, so that was really, really great. And they were always super supportive. Whenever I needed help, they would like promptly reply.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that was great. It was great. Like I shouldn't have been scared, But, yeah.
That sounds like a really positive work environment to be in.
Yeah, definitely. I still haven't been to the studio, but we'll see. Sure, it will be great working with them. They're all fun people, so.
That's great. I know that things are obviously different right now with COVID and things, but what does your average workday kind of look like at the moment? I assume that things might shift when hopefully things level out a bit more, but what sort of is your day-to-day routine?
Well, we are required to do 8 hours at work every day, so, and the mandatory hours are from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So those hours need to be covered, and apart from them, the other hours it can be flexible. But I usually start at 9. I would just go through my tasks. Like I'm usually working on multiple tasks at the same time, so if I'm waiting for feedback, I'll see like, oh, have I received any new updates or feedback on that task, or I'll just check what the other people are working on, like go through Slack or Basecamp or Jira, see what everyone's been up to, and then I'll like start working on my own stuff. By 12, I'm like really, really hungry at that point. So I'm like literally starving, and I'm like, I need food. So I just like really quickly cook something, and it takes me like 30, 40 minutes. It's like my quick lunch break, and then I'm usually working till 6, sometimes like slightly more. It's really flexible. So usually I give updates to my art director, or like whoever I'm reporting to by end of day, or sometimes midday. And then they would give me feedback. Sometimes I'd get feedback on the next day, but it all depends basically who I'm working for and what's been going on. So yeah.
Okay. So you almost have these little bite-sized meetings or bite-sized check-ins throughout the day?
Well, I wouldn't say meetings. It's just like communicating through Slack, or sometimes if there's something complicated to be communicated, then we would have a quick call through Slack, or sometimes we would even have meetings on Discord, like on some private channels. Usually we do not have that many meetings. It's super rare. But every Monday morning we have a meeting for our concept art department, which is pretty fun. You get to see what everyone's been working on.
Oh, that does sound like fun.
Yeah, all the concept artists. So it's just like a meeting for the concept art department, and it's super fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I know, again, that things are quite different with COVID, but outside of COVID, is remote work an option? And if so, is that something that you think you'd prefer, or do you think you would prefer to be in office if that was something that was available and safe?
Yeah, remote work is definitely an option for us, but I would love to go to the studio. Like I like being around people, especially artists, I guess. Like it's so much easier like to communicate, or it's so much easier to get feedback, and it's nice to see their first-hand reaction when you show them something.
Oh, definitely.
It's just something different that you do not get when someone writes on like chat or through words, through writing. Yeah. And yeah, I would definitely go for like a hybrid option, where maybe like I'm working from home like 1 or 2 days, and the other days I'm at the studio. And Digital Extremes, they offer lunch, so that's really great. I don't have to cook food anymore. So yeah, I'll definitely go to the studio.
Food is always a fantastic incentive.
Exactly. Yeah, like I was like working in house in Zviki Design Studio in India, in Bangalore, India, and I had so much fun there, just being there. Like I made so many good friends at the studio. We would even hang out after work and stuff. So
oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Like I would love being in the studio.
So, what is your cost of living currently? Rent, transit, food. Healthcare is not as much of a problem, I guess, because Canada, but...
Yeah, well, like our company, Digital Extremes, they provide health insurance for us, so that's really great.
Oh, that is great.
Yeah, that's great. And like I'm not a Canadian citizenship, right? So I don't
true.
know how healthcare like works here, but like I don't get, I wouldn't have had the healthcare benefits without Digital Extremes paying for my health insurance, basically. Other than that, like I live in a pretty small apartment. It's like a 1-bedroom apartment. It's pretty close to downtown, and it's like a 10-15 minutes walk from the studio. And I pay like 1,070 for rent, which is Canadian dollars, which is pretty decent, I guess. And it's not that expensive. And then I'm paying for internet, phone, what else, electricity, which is like around $40-50 each. For food, I usually just cook myself, so it's not too expensive for me. Maybe like a couple of $100 every month for groceries. And on the weekends, I would maybe go out to eat with my friends or grab a drink or something. So yeah, it's not too expensive, I think.
And we have a little bit of extra time, so is it cool if I ask you some of the extra questions that I sent over?
Yeah, that's the fun stuff, right?
Awesome. What were some of the most common mistakes you found yourself making when you started creating professional concept art?
Common mistakes would be, I don't know, I think it's just like if you're not happy with something, or if something's not working out, then you're trying to figure out stuff by yourself and you're taking too long, when instead you could have just asked someone sitting beside you, like, hey, what would you have done when you're like, when I'm facing this problem? And they'd be like, oh, just do this. I think it's always just like getting out of your own bubble and then asking for help when you need it, or like when you're facing some problems, just reaching out for help. And that was used to be a common mistake that I used to do before.
That makes sense, though. I feel like that's a kind of cross-career mistake.
Yeah, like I think like people always like, make this mistake at some point.
Oh, yeah. It's a very human mistake.
Yeah, it's just you cannot avoid it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. It's fine.
How do you see 3D art being utilized in concept art? And do you enjoy using 3D in your concept art?
Yeah, I think 3D is a really great tool, but it's also a black hole and it can like really suck you in and it can make you forget what's really important. It can like really make you blind, you know, sometimes. Like I really have a love-hate relationship with 3D.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really, I think for a production environment, 3D is really, really great, but sometimes people, I think even I made this mistake of like seeing it as a shortcut for like not having to learn fundamentals or like not having to improve my fundamental design knowledge or fundamental drawing skills, and like, oh, 3D will just do that for me. And then you try to work with 3D and then it just looks like garbage again.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's like definitely I made a lot of mistakes with 3D, and like it just ended up like I ended up wasting a lot of time in 3D. But there's also been other instances where I'll like, oh, I can draw this. I know I can draw this. I'll just spend 2,000 hours trying to draw this when you can just make it in 3D in 2 minutes, right? So there's no really point in like drawing it out when you can just do it in 3D. But I think it's also doesn't hurt to know how you can draw it without like having 3D. You know, someday an apocalypse happens and like you don't have computers anymore. What do you do then? Like you just have a stick and you draw on the sand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean 3D is really great. Like in today's industry, like without 3D, it'll be really hard unless you're like some like god level traditional artist. Then it's different story probably. But 3D is like definitely very important, especially with environments. Like if the art director or someone asks you to change the camera, like you can't like do it in 2D again, right? It'll take you 2 more days again. When in 3D, if you have a block in, you can just like quickly do it. And I think I'm pretty sure everyone knows this, but I think 3D is like important, but don't let it consume you. Basically,
Yeah.
that's my like, yeah, it did consume me and it was hard to like avoid it, but
There's the good with the bad.
there's the good and the bad, exactly. And for concept artists, I used to use Maya because I come from an animation background. I used to use like Maya and that kind of old school polygonal modeling, and that's like it's good for some kind of work still, but it takes so much time. I would rather like I started using 3D Code a couple of years back, and it just changed everything for me. It's just so much quicker, but it's still like not very easy to solve some problems. Like for example, like you want some really like flowy and curve geometry, like shapes, but you don't exactly get what you want. Then I go back to Blender, or you know, like just do a low poly and then do some subsurface division, and like, then I'll get the surface, then I'll take it back to 3D code again. Yeah, 3D is very, very important. It helps you a lot, and always like try to learn new programs and tricks. I'm going to try to learn ZBrush now. I've been procrastinating on this for months, and I think it's time that I finally do it. Like I'm saying it out loud now, so I don't have a choice but to learn it now.
It's recorded.
Yeah,
I have documented proof of it.
It's recorded. I have to do it now. But yeah.
This is a question that I always like asking. What are some non-concept art related experiences that find their way into your creation process?
I I don't know, everything, I guess, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, I know it's concept art and it's a job, but even then, like as artists, I think it's something, no matter how much of a professional or like money making job it is, like in the end it's still personal to you to some degree, and it's a form of your it's a type of self expression in the end. And otherwise, like then I would feel dead as an artist, you know. I just don't have a soul anymore, and I'm just drawing it for the sake of it, you know. And so like everything that's not concept art or art related like finds a way into it, like all of the life experiences that you have had, like your personality itself, like the entirety of your personality like goes into it, I believe. And basically anything, yeah, like you go out for a walk, you you see like a nice leaf, and then the leaf, I don't know, it falls into the water, and then it disappears into something, and then that gives you some weird inspiration, and you don't know what happened. It just finds your way into art, like anything, like reading a book, or maybe like the way a biscuit tastes for some reason. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
anything can find. It's super weird. I don't know how that works, but
No, that I feel like that makes sense though.
yeah, like that's why it's still important to like do stuff outside of art, so that I wouldn't do it expecting that experience to feed into my art, but I would rather do it for the sake of experience, you know, like trying to experience something new, and then as a side effect, like it somehow like does make it into your art always. Whatever life experiences you've had, like it changes your mood, like it gives, and it makes it, maybe you've had a good experience, it makes it into your art. You have had a bad experience, it makes it into your art. And not necessarily saying that it makes your art worse or better, but it makes your art more you. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No,
yeah,
your own personality and experiences come
yeah,
through it.
yeah, exactly.
Well, as a kind of final question, do you have a goal for your future? Do you have something that's driving you with your art? It doesn't have to be concept art specifically, but your art in general.
Hmm. I I really want to focus on, I think, world building right now, and I want to create like a really terrific world that just is filled with awe. And that's why I like concept art, because I'm able to create worlds, and then I can imagine myself being in that world. I think it's just classic escapism. I'm an escapist, I guess.
Uh,
So yeah, I just want to escape reality, I suppose, and go into the worlds that I build, and perhaps other people could escape reality as well into my world. You know, maybe I'm like working on Anya, but maybe I would start another world at some point, and you know, just keep building worlds basically. And other than that, I really really enjoy old school paintings, like master paintings and stuff like that, like plein air paintings or just portraits. Or and I would really love to get more into traditional media, like stuff like oil painting. I love like old artists like Sargent or Anders Zorn, Arthur Hacker, or Peter Bonsted. Like they're all so amazing, and I really admire their craftsmanship, the way they can make strokes, or just their technical prowess, you know. So hopefully someday I can be as good as them, you know. I'll try that. That's another goal that I have.
that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again for coming on today. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope I didn't say anything too controversial or anything, but thanks for having me.
Before we go, are there any platforms or projects that you're currently working on that you'd like to give a little shout out to?
I'm mostly posting on ArtStation and Instagram. I'm sure I can share my links to you. And then
Oh, yes, and we will definitely be posting those as well.
Sure. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
And if anyone's interested, are you currently open to commissions?
Yeah, sure. I'll share my email as well. Just drop an email.
Awesome. That is fantastic. I will let them know that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking about concept art with you.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you had a great time. This was so much fun.
Have a great evening, and thank you again.
Thank you. You too. And thank you everyone for listening. If you are a concept artist or know one who might be interested in coming in on the show, please let me know and have a wonderful rest of your day.